Greetings, Marsh here. Welcome to episode 384 of my bonded Factorio playthrough. In this episode, we're going to follow our plan from Hellmod to make gold science. Enjoy. So we've got our gold science setup to do here. It has been configured correctly, but we have lots of stages. We need to do this with an eye of making sure the supporting resources get in. So the capacitor bank is going to require mostly normal resources, but it also requires the silicon nitride. So the silicon nitride needs to be done alongside it. So how about we just start with that? The size that we're dealing with is probably this space right here. We could go down this way, but one, the road doesn't extend down here. And two, this space is smaller than this space. So it just kind of makes sense to use this area up here and only extend down if we have to. So let's assume the road's at the top and the bus is at the bottom, and we have a general shape we need, and we also have a build that has already done something quite similar. So let's grab the part of it that repeats. The red input belts will be fine, although we could make this rather small if we had the input and the output on a single belt. And since we're going to be building a lot of these, that one square might matter in the end. So let's do that. Let's save the space. Let's just assume that the supply belt is going to look something like that. So the input is on the right and the output will be on the left. So this one needs to be a near, and that will get that done. So we need a few of these. We now have the repeating pattern. It just attaches right there. And we probably want to attempt to use the entire available space, but the resources are going to be delivered by drone. Oh, that's so close there. So we still need to leave some space at the top for this stuff to occur. So doing this probably makes sense because that's the size of the drone depot, so having this down here leaves room for that and also for other belts that we might need. Whereas if we try to put this down here, it would not fit. So what do we actually have? Just 36. That is unfortunate, because we need many more than 36. The amount of space this is going to take is obscene, because this is for just 1/4 of the silicon nitride that we need. At least it's 180, so we now have enough. We need 156, and unfortunately that means cutting this down. But if we did this but one row higher, could we make it work? Because we're going to be building so many of these that doing it in a minimum amount of space is actually pretty important. That's 152. Okay. This gives us our 156. It's taller, though, which makes it so it really doesn't fit. I mean, it's so very close, but it essentially doesn't fit. I mean, we're going to be building 4 of these, so making it tall would save us 4 of these side rows, which will make a big difference in the long run. It essentially will save an entire one of these setups. That gives you an idea of how much space it would save if we could push them up like that. I think it'll be fine. We'll just do drone input from the sides, and we'll make it work. So that means we don't need any of that. And then actually another thing we can do to save space is just to move the drone road up a little bit. Make it a little wider here. It certainly could afford to be wider. And we'd really only need to remove this one tree farm to make it work. So let's assume that, well, we know the input will come from above. And we want to do some form of direct insertion here. It'll get the gears from one side. And then, yeah, I know I said we only needed one of these, but having them go straight through looks so clean. So let's do that. And we're going to need to have a bunch of these, so it's not as simple as just making this sideways. So it probably makes sense to try to put it down here. And our limiting factor is the gears, so we need 6 of them. So let's check our work here. Steel obviously goes into the coils, makes the gears. It needs batteries and the nitride. The batteries come up here and mix with this belt. The nitride comes as a result of that giant setup. It also needs insulated wire, which comes from here, which needs its tinned wire, and they get both of their input from there. And then the output comes down. One thing we need to do is split this apart. because we do have that byproduct to deal with. Let's just put some speed modules in there. I'm pretty sure it doesn't need this, but it should work. And then our output will go the other way to wherever the next part of the setup is. It would be nice to install this and test it, because that would suck if there was some huge error in our plan. But ultimately, we just need to make all of it. We can test for that huge error by checking one of these setups, and then once it's good, build it 3 more times. So we have the choice of doing the particle injectors or the random number analyzer here, neither of which need the silicon nitride. However, both of them share tungsten products, so we want that to be between them. However, only one of them needs the cobalt steel. So let's do that one, which would be the random number analyzer. So it looks like the limiting factor is basically 3. So we can follow the line this way, making that energy store. And then on this side, it gets no coils at all, just the input of plates. However, and awkwardly, it does make the coppery byproduct, but luckily it's this first stage, so we can handle it here. And also, important to note, that these numbers are the green belt limiting numbers. This side wasn't really limited by belts. It just needed the silicon nitride, which is easier to make here. However, this side is the belt limited side, which means it needs green belts. And this is specifically the part that's limited. One's going to have the tungsten plate, and one's going to have the cobalt steel. And part of the reason I'm doing this, besides just making it square and nice and appealing, is that it doesn't really get any smaller just because you have less plate choppers, because I have to go somewhere. And unless you're going to do some snaky belt stuff where you like put it up here and snake it down, it's just kind of easier to make it a straight line so you don't have to worry about it. And that's actually a lot of ball bearings, so I'm glad we're doing it this way, even though the 1 stack inserter is actually plenty for it. Okay, well, we only need 3 of these. It's a long setup, but quite straightforward. That gets all of those, but we also need to do the gear machines, which we need 3 of them. So let's do that. And of course, they'll need their plate choppers. Also need the same gear machines on this side. It has an input of tungsten plates, which will come from a setup on the side here, which goes into here to make the thermal energy stores, and also goes down here to make the gears. Thermal energy stores create byproduct, which is sent on this belt to get processed. They also need the cobalt steel, which will come from a setup that's over here. And those are belt limited resources, and they have their own belt, which is good. They go through and get heated up, and then they go through to get put in here, which also needs those titanium gear wheels and bearings. The bearings are direct inserted from this side, and the gears are made from down here, and they get their titanium on normal coils. So that looks good. Now we want to position this in a way that takes up the least amount of space without overcrowding it. In fact, it looks like it'll work pretty much just fine. Although for space reasons, we might want to just smush this in. And in fact, our undergrounds are so long, we can just jump this whole thing. It's not an issue, because we don't know what kind of changes might need to be done to this, so let's just try to maximize the available space. And now that we do that, this fits in here super cleanly. We can change these belts' positions. Now we can slide this in where that's the titanium. This is our output, which combines with this one as well to create the science output, which will go to the side. And these will come from whatever the nearby setup is. Unfortunately, that is just not enough, so let's do that. Cool, we are making progress, and looks like the power setup is operating normally. There is not much to see, but we can check our work here, where about 25%, or I guess now 33% of these should be online. And that's about what we see. And a quarter of the thorium reactors are online, and that is what we see. All of the deuterium reactors should be going, which they are, but it looks like some of them are shutting down now, but they kind of do that. And we should still be making more fuel cells. And we are. Eventually, these will finally build up, and then we'll start building the muons. Ultimately, we already have the maximum number of reactors based on how much deuterium is available. But I am noticing that we are full on manganese, but strangely we're not making a full belt of manganese. And it sure seems like it could be faster because it's just pulsing. So it seems like the limiting factor right here are just these belts. I wonder if there is a red belt in there somewhere. And yep, there it is. So our output of manganese was half of what it was supposed to be. There we go. And it's weird how you do that and suddenly the preference is to go left and not right when it was going right before. So unloaders can be weird like that sometimes. But we really need that manganese because it cuts down the use of aluminum, titanium, iron, and steel. All of which we kind of need a lot of it, so I'm glad that got fixed. And that one empty belt is the chrome belt, and we rarely produce chrome, so it's pretty much perpetually empty. It's a byproduct ore, so it's never full. Awesome, awesome. We're making progress. Well, the next thing that makes sense now is cobalt steel, because that only goes into this setup. It is super easy, and the input will come from the top because that's where the drone path will be. That the first thing will be the input of this, and it's really not that much because of productivity modules. And then we just need a line of 40 machines. And it probably makes the most sense that it's essentially just a straight line, because that will make it narrow, and we have more than enough space for this. And 2 red belts will be barely enough, but just to make sure there's no inserter limitations, let's use purples. So we got 1, put a second one, make them near side, and to keep it narrow, just use normal power poles. Let's see how many of these we can do in a line. I imagine we'll get enough in here. Yep, this last row isn't necessary, but the power poles are. And in doing that, we now have our full output, and some of that will go into this setup here. It looks like we chose it to be this belt. So let's put it in there, and it's too long to fit in that little space, although could we make it work? If we made it super wide, would it fit in here? Because space is there and we have no other plans for machines in there. That would be nice. And does the shape fit? Well, kind of. It's a little wide though. But actually we don't even need it. Just the 2 will work. Let's do some alternating sides to make it look nicer. So let's put this in here and might as well line it up with those other machines to make it look a little nicer. So our input goes in there. Guess we'll just slide it over here and back in. And that does it for the cobalt steel. Awesome. That is a really efficient use of space, considering that this is a very irregular setup. Okay. Well, the next thing we should make are the tungsten plates, because they also go into our setup here. But also they go the other direction into the virtual particle injector, but they go to the other direction in the form of tungsten powder, not plates. The tungsten powder is just the base form of tungsten, so we can just use that directly. Meanwhile, the setup that makes our tungsten plates also needs the powder, but it's going to go into the setup that we're working on now. So since that's the nearest thing to what we're doing, that's the next part of it. And really, the build actually isn't that big. The giant part of this whole thing was doing the silicon nitride. So actually, I'm guessing all of this is going to fit in a relatively small space. Unfortunately, this is getting a little clogged, so it's going to have to just be in here in places. But we'll figure that out. Although I'm not sure what the appropriate size would be as far as dimensions, like should it be square, should it be rectangle? But the other input of this is quite simple. So I'm guessing the correct size is actually going to be very narrow, because if it was square, it would just have a lot of empty space in here, whereas a narrow setup will efficiently use the space. I don't know if it's going to be 1 machine levels of narrow, but having 2 of them next to each other ought to be fine. And we'd be looking at something like this. That gives us 18, which means we don't need the last 2. So now we have the setup. Let's try to line them up. No reason to completely smash them next to each other. It's always nice to have little spaces for belts just in case you need them. And now this output is the tungsten plates, which can go into here. And let's put this belt in a slightly zigzag but more compressed manner, so we have a little bit of space. And that covers everything that we need for this part of the setup, and we have created 2 of the 3 resources that we need to make the gold science. Now it's just the particle injector. And we've also built all 3 of our resource producing sections. So this part is tiny and just has some inputs, and I guess we'll just put them down here. It just needs an enormous amount of wires and a plate chopper on the other side, which is the limiting factor. And besides that, it has 3 other inputs, which we could do in a more narrow way if we did this, but move them up. And the tungsten powder is the thing we need a bunch of, so it should probably be on its own belt. So we can do this. Then on the other side we have our input. We'll do the short inserters. We got to have the plate choppers in here, which is easy. It's another situation where extra long inserters by themselves are not enough, because we put it here, it won't reach. So we've got to do that instead and do inserterception here. Although it might look slightly better if we move these up, so at least the inserters aren't going over each other. And then we have an output, which is small. Long-handeds go in there, and that's most of it. But it's not quite enough, so we need to have an extra one in here, so we have our 3 machines. Do we have everything we need? Well, titanium goes in, gets chopped, and then inserted here. Tinned wire coil gets chopped, placed in here. Tungsten powder comes on these undergrounds, gets placed in, and then circuits and the rubies come in on this belt to get placed, and then the output, all of it, goes on here. We need to place this with an eye of making this setup as narrow as possible, and we can combine some of these belts. And what's funny is this little gap right here, we could actually use it. Should we? I mean, it's not really an issue. Just as long as this was like right here. Yeah, so it was in a straight line. Because this output needs to keep going, but it can also go straight down. And let's use a splitter here, just because there's no point in wasting a bunch of rubber by setting it up that belt where it will never get used. So that'll just go through. The input of the rubies and circuit boards will come from here somewhere. Let's see, the titanium can be put through a splitter and go through. But we do need to handle these byproducts, because that'll be annoying if we forget one of the byproducts somewhere and have to calculate for that. Probably should put those speed modules in there. So let's put it there. To the right go the byproducts. The output will go straight down. Now we know where the input will go. And also nothing else is actually going to go here, so that can go straight through. And then the output will go down. And there's not going to be anything here, so it doesn't need to smush in. And then this one right here will be our output, which will go alongside that one. Alright, looking pretty good. So unless I've forgotten something significant, that's actually everything we need here. So the only part we haven't built is the actual science making part, but that is going to be consolidated into one section where we need to build 4 of these. The belts are pointed to the right, but since we already have stuff, sending resources to the left makes sense, and man, that's a big setup. But sending them to the left here seems to make more sense. So that's our final output going between these. That just makes it a little less work for us to do. Well, now we need to get this thing placed. We might as well look at the size of it compared to our factory as a whole, and it just barely doesn't fit, and that road will need to be moved. But can we get 4 of these in here? Maybe. Man, it's going to be close. Well, it doesn't matter if we can't. We could potentially put like a 4th one down there. And of course, we'll actually need to make the science. But we can use this space right here for that. So it's looking like now what we need to do is basically extend this bus all the way to the very end. So it really did take up this whole space. And we need roads too. So we'll pull up this road, and I guess we'll just remove this tree farm. It's basically in the way. So unfortunately, it has to go. And then I guess we'll just move the road up to the maximum space it can take. And that build has no provisions for robot zones. So I guess we'll find out when we place it, if it actually needs it. Okay, we've got the room for it now. So it's all of this, and very laggy. I don't know if we necessarily want to line it up with other machines, but it looks like it would be fine if we did. Hard to even see everything, but let's just smash it in as tight as it'll go, because that might matter. So there we go. So it fits in there, and we have some space for the roads up above. And actually, seems like a radar lost power. Yep. But it's also getting connected again. Well, the robot zone definitely doesn't fill the middle here, but we have plenty of space in here for said zone. So since we do, we might as well make a robot motel here. Give them some places to park. Well, we're just about done getting this set up. We still need to do the drone requests, but most of these items are in here. We do need to bring the powder from somewhere, and that's going to require 4 very awkward belts, and we don't really have the room on this bus to do it. We'll probably just have to place them down here and take up a little space from the science setup, so let's assume that is what the case will be. Well, we're going to have like 4 belts here, and they will jump up and take 1 bus slot that is available when they can. And it looks like we can do it with the one that's after the coils here. Man, it's going to be a lot of belts in a weird area, but they're going to come in basically through here and jump over all of this. So 3 would go to the side immediately. The other one does have room to just go straight up. Take this 1 slot and bounce into there. But research completed on 1 more item, which is fantastic. So now we're working on the other one that needs all of that military science. But for now, we have another item we can make, and this is one of the hard ones. It's going to require the protection fields, and we're going to need 100 energy shield 6s for this. So I guess the question here is it worth doing the Mark 3s or the Mark 6s? Uh-oh, something got damaged. Is that biters? Yes, it was. Uh-oh. And that's where some lag is coming from. Man, they are trying hard. I got rid of some of these plasma turrets here because I was worried about lag, in the sense where it's bad enough when 1 turret fires and then kills a bunch of biters, but what if 5 of them do the same thing? So we still might need them because they really like attacking this corner, as you can see. That's where the lag is. It's when they all die instantly. That is what is causing it. But we're holding, so I think I'm fine with this. And of course, we want them to do this because look at all of those orbs. It lags it just to select them. And did we actually launch one of these? Not yet. And suddenly we're basically out of biter orbs already. We certainly want this machine to go as fast as it absolutely could, with lots of very fast inserters. It's incredible how much this goes through. Technically, 927 small orbs a second. It's not that far off from actually doing that. And we are prioritizing using the small orbs, but ultimately they run out, and we need to use the big orbs. So how it's working now is that if small orbs exist, 25 of them go into a big one, and if we are short on the big orbs, we can take 1 of them, add 5 of the regular orbs to it, and then make 5 total orbs. So we do lose a little bit of orb there, but we're basically using a catalyst to multiply the amount of the different type of colored orbs. The way we would grow orbs from scratch is we would make the small ones from these pre-artifacts, which is essentially petri dishes with a metal paste of some kind and one of the gems. And the paste is just powder, which in itself is ground up ingots of that type and cellulose. So this requires a lot of resources, especially the gems that we don't really make in super large quantities. So I am worried about how long this will take, but we'll probably have many hours to actually collect them. Man, our orbs are just disappearing. It's not good. This is the part I was worried about generating all these orbs for these, but we have at least 16 hours of time in front of us, because that's how long, at 75 items a second, those last two faster than light researches will take. So if it looks like we will collect a sufficient amount of orbs from the biters in 16 hours, we won't actually need to build any new setups. But time will tell, because normally we've just been burning all these extra orbs. So if we stop doing that, we may find ourselves with a great deal of them. We could also incite the biters by creating even more pollution, and we probably will over time. As we min-max all of our different setups, we will continue to produce pollution. I could always put pollution reducing modules in the tree farms so they clean less pollution. That's always an option. Man, this has taken a long time to get one of these built. We'll let that go on for a while then. It's certainly not going to hurt anything to stop building, because I definitely want to see that get inserted onto the rocket. Okay, we were working on getting this whole setup seated. So we've got to jump over everything, but it's quite easy. And this is something we will not be able to support in the beginning, but that's okay. We'll just do what we can. So the belt keeps going. Then when it gets close to the ore bus here, then it can just shoot its resources up. So we need to grab powder, and we actually have it going in right here. So if we just expanded this to be 4 belts wide, it would work. But that means we need to find some slots. And since tin stops here, how about we use that? Right now our goal is not getting this set up to run at full speed. It's just to see if it works, and in fact, at 1/4 speed, it probably will work fine. And tungsten powder only stacks in 100, which makes it just that much more difficult to move in large quantities. And that should eventually get all those connected. Now we need to deliver the ingots: silicon, cobalt, steel, and nickel. And there is a road up here, and that might be best served by just going straight into this road on the side here. Let's put them over here and try to space them a little bit so they won't compete for space. Now we could use this road right here, but it might be a longer path for the drones, and perhaps it would be better just to make everything the same. And they're getting picked up now, but we have the cobalt, which is the next one, and I am worried about steel, because we are going to need a lot of it. But another thing we can do is just switch all of these to productivity modules, because now we're going to be using way less of this stuff from trains, because it's going to be done in a different way, which means that none of this stuff has to be particularly fast anymore, because we are reducing the load. So let's just minimize the amount of wasted resources here. And since it's only 1 belt, I guess we'll just keep it purple. And we're completely out of regular artifacts now. Well, do we have any more to grab? Kind of. Of course, we just grabbed a bunch, so it's not nearly as many, but it's still thousands and thousands of them. But we should have all of our ingots hooked up now, so we just have to wait it out. And it looks like we didn't completely connect this here. So that's connected. And that's connected. Oh, there's some weird stuff going on here, but we're getting there. What are these protection fields looking like? No. We only made 76 of them, so we didn't even have enough orbs in our giant buffer to make one of them. And we had 300,000 small orbs on hand. Maybe I should have been saving them in big orb form over the course of pretty much the entire playthrough, because maybe we would have had enough to do this. Well, that is an issue, but we should probably wait on doing any new setups until we finish the one we're working on, because I'm guessing the massive amount of research we need to do is going to be the limiting factor, not how fast we can actually make these orbs. So because of that, maybe the launches will just have to be on hold for a little while. But doing gold is more important, because it will unlock more spaceship parts that we can work on. And of course, the sooner we get gold going, the sooner we start that 16-hour clock. Well, we've got our 10 drones on the way with steel, which means I think we have most everything ready to test this. So I suppose we should start hooking stuff up and see what happens. First, let's do our silicon delivery, which does do an awkward loop, but it's just because the directions of the belts. And I guess for now I can unhook it here. So they're coming in. Machines are very slow, but they're working. And they drop it on the other side of the belt. Those items make it to the end. And then they do the loop again, going down and getting placed. Let's hook these two up and start making our cobalt steel. And unhook it, I suppose. Oh, and then both of these sides actually need to be connected. I guess it's not too big a deal if it has to do a big loop, I suppose. It'll just go around the loop and make items. And it seems good. Although that one inserter might be too slow. Okay, let's throw in the tungsten powder. It will start getting pulled into the machines, but that's okay. It will then swing around and go up here. So in goes the nickel as well. And, well, that's not right. It should be on this side. So let's clear this out, and then suddenly it's basically full belt of resources, but it's operating very fast. Okay then, so far so good. Now it's time to start putting in the regular resources. First, the cable and the rubber. So the rubber gets held off there. Cable continues, but these do not reach all the way. They need to be spaced. There we go. And they were inserted. So that much is good. The cable also went up and made it into that machine just fine. So we do steel. Seems fine. And then the batteries. And also the silicon nitride, which is everything we need for this component. And there we go. Making a bunch of stuff. But ultimately what we need is being placed on the delivery belt. So that seems fine. Next goes the titanium, which goes to both sides, so let's unhook it from there so we can see just this one. It made the gears, and unfortunately it looks like we missed something, that these plates need to go into each one of these machines, which is really annoying. Well, I think we can get rid of our direct insertion here if we just pick these up and place them back down. So all that happens like normal. So we'll move that substation to the side, put one more of these in here, and if we do so, we can be super abusive when it comes to adjustable inserters, because we can really slam it in here. So if we pick up from 2 squares over there and drop up, that'll get in there. And whoa, that is totally slowing down. You can see it because of the distance changing. And then the other one pulls from 2 to the left. And the last one is quite easy. So it has been patched. And they got inserted in. Okay, let's do the titanium on this side. Those are looking good, which means it needs circuits. And the rubies. And since they're actually coming from above, probably be better to put that up there instead. It's looking good. It's processing the resources. The science item that it's making is going down the belt. And that got a bunch of rubies, so let's just get rid of that guy. And I guess we can help by just putting the rubies in here. Man, they stack poorly. We'll use them. Okay, so far so good. Let's pump in the cobalt steel. Then the tungsten plates. And there we go. Making the last item that we need. Of course, we'll have to performance test it to really see. And that belt's the wrong way. If something is slow here, unfortunately, we basically need to build a bunch of them first. And those are our items. That's the end of this episode. On the next one, we're going to put it all together and start making the gold science packs at a much higher rate. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later.